10 Golden Age Hollywood stars who aged terribly. Hollywood sold us a dream, perfect faces, flawless bodies, and stars who seemed frozen in time. In the Golden Age, these icons weren't just actors. They were living monuments, carved into the public imagination as symbols of beauty, confidence, and glamour. To millions, they looked untouchable, eternal, almost mythic. But behind that shimmering facade was a truth nobody wanted to confront. Time doesn't care about fame. It doesn't care about beauty. And it certainly doesn't care about the legends we build around people. In fact, for many of Hollywood's brightest stars, the spotlight didn't preserve them. It accelerated their decline. The pressure to remain young, the stress of public scrutiny, the destructive coping habits, and the desperate attempts to stay relevant all combined into a force more unforgiving than age itself. Some stars began to crumble long before their fans ever noticed. Others fought to keep their youthful glow, only to end up transforming into versions of themselves that were almost unrecognizable. And a few suffered declines so dramatic and heartbreaking that audiences genuinely wondered if the photos were real. These aren't just stories about wrinkles or weight gain. They're stories about the cost of perfection and the hidden battles behind the brightest lights. Because when the cameras stop rolling and the applause fades, even Hollywood's gods and goddesses must face the same fate as everyone else, and some face it far harsher. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 Golden Age stars whose final years stunned the world, revealing just how fragile fame can be. From child prodigies who aged decades too soon, to bombshells who disappeared behind failed surgeries, to icons whose tragic illnesses were misunderstood for years, each story exposes a different side of Hollywood's most carefully guarded secret. And when we reach number 7, you'll see a transformation so shocking that entire audiences thought it had to be a hoax, until the heartbreaking truth emerged. Let's begin. 1. Mickey Rooney, the boy wonder who grew old too fast. Mickey Rooney burst onto Hollywood screens with a kind of energy that felt unstoppable. In his youth, he had that perfect mix of charisma and mischief that made him look like he could stay young forever. But behind the scenes, Mickey was living at a pace no one could keep up with. Rumors swirled about late-night partying, heavy gambling, and a growing dependence on alcohol. Habits that quietly chipped away at the cheerful image the public adored. By his early 50s, the transformation was hard to ignore. His once bright eyes grew tired, his face softened and sagged, and the spark that defined him began to fade. 8 marriages, endless financial troubles, and the stress of trying to hold on to a fading career pushed him into a constant state of exhaustion. The aging process didn't creep up on him. It slammed into him all at once. A single TV appearance in the 1970s shocked audiences. The boyish star they remembered looked decades older than his real age, almost as if time had rushed ahead and forgotten to take him with it. Mickey lived to 93, but he spent half his life wearing the face of an old man long before he truly was one. And the next star didn't just age. She disappeared so completely that even her most loyal fans struggled to recognize her. 2. Bette Hutton, the blonde bombshell who vanished. Bette Hutton wasn't just a star, she was a lightning bolt. In the 1940s, her high-voltage energy, sharp comedic timing, and all-American beauty made her one of Hollywood's most magnetic performers. She lit up every screen she touched, but behind that shining persona was a woman pushed to her breaking point. Bette battled deep depression, career pressure, and a growing dependence on prescription pills. Struggles she tried to hide while still delivering those explosive performances audiences loved. When her career stalled in the late 1950s, the collapse hit her hard. The combination of emotional turmoil, financial stress, and failed relationships began to show on her face. She aged quickly, almost suddenly, and the changes only intensified as she slipped out of the spotlight. Years later, when Bette resurfaced in the 1970s, even longtime fans were stunned. Reports claimed she had undergone procedures that were still experimental at the time, and the results left her features tight, strained, and oddly distorted. In one rare interview, the harsh lighting revealed a version of Bette that felt worlds apart from the glowing star people remembered. The transformation was so dramatic, she once admitted, "I don't look in mirrors anymore." And if Betty's decline was painful, the next story shows how aging can turn haunting when a person becomes a shadow of themselves. 3. Peter Lorre, the man who became his own shadow. Peter Lorre was never the conventional Hollywood heartthrob, but he had something more powerful, an eerie, magnetic presence that drew audiences in instantly. In his early years, there was a softness to him, a quiet intensity behind those wide, expressive eyes. But as time went on, the life behind the scenes began carving itself into his face. After a serious back injury, Lorre reportedly developed a dependence on morphine, and combined with heavy drinking, the change in his appearance accelerated at a frightening pace. By the 1950s, Peter's once round face had collapsed into sharp angles. His cheeks hollowed out, his skin took on a gray, sickly tone, and those famous eyes, already unsettling in his youth, began to bulge more prominently, giving him a permanently startled, almost haunted expression. The transformation was so stark that makeup artists had to work to make him look healthier, not more sinister. Friends said that by his final years, he seemed like a man disappearing in slow motion. Even Vincent Price, after seeing Lorre one last time, reportedly remarked that he looked more peaceful in death than he had in life. But while Peter faded into a shadow, the next star destroyed her own beauty with her own hands. 4. Gloria Grahame, beauty destroyed by her own hand. Gloria Grahame had one of the most unforgettable faces in 1950s film noir. Those pouty lips, that smoldering gaze, and her strangely delicate confidence made her the perfect femme fatale. But behind all that allure was an insecurity she could never escape, an obsession with her upper lip. While audiences adored her unique beauty, Gloria became convinced it wasn't good enough. And that belief slowly pushed her toward one of Hollywood's most tragic, self-inflicted transformations. Rumors suggest she began with small tricks, like tucking bits of cotton under her lip to make it look fuller. But when that wasn't enough, she turned to increasingly aggressive procedures. Reports claim she underwent early fat grafting attempts and experimental treatments that, at the time, weren't remotely refined. The results were devastating. Scar tissue formed. Her lip became swollen, uneven, and partially stiff. The subtle pout that once captivated audiences turned into something distorted and unnatural. Directors tried hiding the damage with shadows and specific camera angles, but in person the change was impossible to ignore. Even her ex-husband reportedly didn't recognize her years later. Gloria's transformation became a tragic reminder of what happens when a star tries to fix what was never broken. And while Gloria altered her beauty chasing perfection, the next legend aged in a completely different direction, expanding in every possible way. 5. Orson Welles, the genius who expanded in all directions. Orson Welles entered Hollywood like a force of nature, brilliant, imposing, and effortlessly charismatic. In his youth, he carried himself with the confidence of someone destined to reshape the entire industry. With his sharp features, intense stare, and powerful voice, he looked every bit the prodigy who created Citizen Kane at just 25. But as the years passed, Welles faced a very different kind of battle. One fought against his own body. His weight gain became legendary, fueled by long nights, lavish meals, heavy drinking, and the cigars he rarely put down. The transformation was dramatic. The defined jawline disappeared, his cheeks thickened, and his once commanding presence took on a softer, heavier shape. By his 50s, Orson looked decades older than he actually was. He tried to hide the changes. He wore flowing black capes, favored close-up shots from the chest upward, and grew a beard to mask the shifting contours of his face. But no amount of fabric or camera tricks could conceal how rapidly time was catching up with him. By the end, Orson moved like a man carrying both his genius and the physical weight of a lifetime spent burning the candle from every direction. And if Wells aged under the pressure of excess, the next icon endured something even harsher, her body fading fast, while her legendary eyes refused to give up their fire. 6. Bette Davis. Those eyes watched everything fade. Bette Davis built her entire legend on intensity. Her eyes weren't just expressive, they were unforgettable, capable of delivering desire, fury, or pure contempt with a single glance. But the same fierce spirit that made her a Hollywood titan couldn't protect her from the brutal aging process that hit her harder than almost any of her peers. Decades of chain smoking, reportedly up to 4 packs a day, etched deep lines around her mouth and eyes, pulling her features into a permanent scowl. Then came a series of strokes in the early 1980s that left part of her face weakened and her once crisp speech slurred. When Bette appeared on talk shows during her final years, audiences were stunned. The full, commanding presence that defined her career had shrunk into a thin, fragile frame. Her skin looked paper-thin, stretched tightly across pronounced facial bones. Even her famously upright posture collapsed into a stooped, trembling silhouette. But through all of that, her eyes remained untouched, sharp, alert, and still burning with the same unmistakable fire she carried through her greatest roles. It was as if the legend inside her refused to fade, even as everything around it did. And if Bette's decline was harsh, the next transformation became one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking mysteries, so shocking that many people believed it had to be fake. 7. Rita Hayworth. The tragedy no one understood. Rita Hayworth wasn't just a star, she was a symbol. In the 1940s, her face was everywhere. Magazine covers, barracks walls, movie posters, even warplanes. She embodied glamour so completely that people truly believed she would remain untouched by time. But her decline became one of the most shocking and heartbreaking in Hollywood history, largely because almost no one understood what was really happening to her. In her 40s, Rita began forgetting lines, something completely unlike her. Directors whispered that she seemed distracted, confused, or slipping. Many blamed her drinking, and even Rita believed that explanation. But alcohol wasn't the cause, and something far more devastating was quietly taking over her mind. As the years passed, her transformation grew impossible to ignore. Her movements became slow and uncertain. Her once bright expression faded into a vacant, puzzled stare. She gained and lost weight in unpredictable cycles. Friends said she often didn't recognize people she had known for decades. In public, she looked lost, frightened, and heartbreakingly unaware of her own legendary status. The truth didn't come out until 1980. Rita had been suffering from Alzheimer's long before the world understood the disease. By then, the damage was irreversible. What fans saw wasn't a fallen beauty. It was a woman fighting an invisible enemy that stole her piece by piece. And while Rita's tragedy was unintentional, the next star's decline came from something far more violent, a single moment that shattered his face and his future. 8. Montgomery Clift, beauty shattered and reassembled. Montgomery Clift entered Hollywood with a kind of beauty that didn't seem real. He wasn't rugged like the stars before him. He was delicate, soulful, almost angelic. Alongside Brando and Dean, Clift helped redefine masculinity with sensitivity and emotional depth. But his rise was split in half one night in 1956 when a car accident outside Elizabeth Taylor's house shattered not just his bones, but the face that had made him a star. The crash broke his jaw, nose, and sinus, leaving him partially paralyzed on one side. Surgeons did what they could, but symmetry, the thing that made him mesmerizing, couldn't be restored. One side of his face remained expressive and handsome. The other seemed frozen, slightly sunken, unable to match the life in his eyes. It was like watching two different people inside the same face. The physical pain never stopped, and to cope, Clift turned to pills and alcohol. The combination aged him at an alarming rate. By his early 40s, he looked decades older, thin, hollow-cheeked, and haunted. His final performances carried a fragility so raw it was sometimes painful to watch. Elizabeth Taylor once called his decline the longest suicide in Hollywood, slow, public, and impossible to turn away from. And while Clift's transformation came from tragedy, the next Hollywood icon aged in a way that made her look permanently startled, almost as if she never escaped her most famous scene. 9. Janet Leigh, frozen in fear. Janet Leigh had the kind of natural beauty that felt effortless. In Psycho, her wide eyes and soft features made her both relatable and unforgettable, cementing her as one of Hollywood's most iconic leading ladies. But as she grew older, Janet became one of the early actresses to experiment with cosmetic procedures at a time when the techniques were still primitive, and the results could be unpredictable. She didn't go overboard all at once. It happened slowly, through a series of facelifts, tightening treatments, and fillers that were often done too close together. Each procedure tugged her features a little tighter, smoothed her skin a little more, and subtly altered the way her expressions worked. By the 1980s, the change became unmistakable. Her face looked unusually taut, especially around her cheeks and eyes. The natural movement that once made her so captivating on camera grew stiff and limited. The once warm expressiveness in her eyes shifted into a permanent, wide-open look, almost like she was frozen in the same fear that made her famous in Hitchcock's shower scene. By her final public appearances, Janet still carried elegance, but her face didn't move the way it used to. The fear was gone from her eyes, but so was the natural softness that once made her unforgettable. And while Janet's transformation was cosmetic, the next star faced something far harsher, the crumbling of a tough guy legend under the weight of age, illness, and stress. 10. Edward G. Robinson, when the tough guy crumbled. Edward G. Robinson built an entire career on his face. Those heavy-lidded eyes, that sharp voice, and the tough, unshakable expression made him Hollywood's go-to gangster long before the mob genre had rules. He didn't look like a typical leading man, but he had something better: presence, strength, authority, and audiences believed every second of it. But age hit Robinson with an unforgiving speed. Years of chain smoking, often with a cigar practically glued to his hand, left his skin deeply creased and leathery. The constant squinting through cigar smoke carved heavy lines around his already drooping lids. Then came the health issues. Chronic heart problems forced him onto harsh medications, and those treatments caused significant fluid retention. Slowly, the strong angles of his face softened into swollen jowls, puffy cheeks, and sagging skin that made him look permanently exhausted. By the 1960s, Robinson's transformation stunned fans. His posture collapsed into a stoop, his complexion faded into a pale, uneven tone, and the once commanding mob boss now moved with the slow, labored gait of a man far older than his years. Even makeup artists struggled to restore the intensity he once radiated so effortlessly. The tough guy mask had crumbled, revealing just how fragile even Hollywood's strongest legends could be. The golden age of Hollywood promised perfection, faces that never aged, legends who never faded, and stars who seemed bigger than life itself. But behind the shimmering lights and carefully crafted images were real people, fighting battles no audience ever saw. Some aged too quickly under the weight of fame. Others tried to hold on to youth until the effort reshaped them entirely. and a few suffered tragedies that no amount of beauty, talent, or stardom could protect them from. Their stories remind us of something Hollywood rarely admits. Even its brightest icons are human. They feel fear, pressure, insecurity, pain, and the industry that elevates them often becomes the same force that accelerates their decline. Yet, there's something strangely powerful in seeing the truth behind the glamour. It shows us that aging isn't a failure. It's a reality, one that even the most legendary faces must face. And while these 10 stars aged in ways that shocked the world, their impact remains untouched. Their films live on, their legacies endure, and the stories they left behind still shape the way we think about beauty, fame, and the fragile nature of immortality.